Hello, I'm Dr. Blanche Grube, and I have some sad news to pass on to our viewers. We just recently experienced the passing of one of dentistry's great teachers. He was not only a great teacher, he was a great researcher. He was a man with a huge heart, and a man who literally changed the world of dentistry. He was the writer of a book called It's All in Your Head. When he published this book, he thought that the American Dental Association and all of the dentists were going to be very grateful that he had discovered that mercury, in fact, did come off the teeth, and that mercury was making people sicker than they ought to be at an earlier age than they ought to be. Well, he didn't exactly get the accolades nor the recognition from the American Dental Association that he should have gotten. Instead, what he got was a lot of grief. But that's already old news. Everybody should read this book. It's still very pertinent even today. Dr. Huggins graduated from dental school in 1962, University of Nebraska. And he started out as I did, as a conventional dentist, until he had the opportunity to meet Dr. Olympio Pinto at a nutrition conference in Mexico City, Mexico. I believe the year was 1972, 1973, somewhere around there. Dr. Huggins was giving a lecture on nutrition, and he went ahead and actually not only showed the cases that he was very successful with and very successful with in curing periodontal disease, but he actually showed some of the cases where he was not successful and the patient's periodontal disease did not get better. Well, after his lecture, Dr. Olympio Pinto, who was from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, who came from a very prominent dental family. His mother was a dentist, his father was a dentist, and they were mercury-free dentists at the turn of the century. Dr. Olympio Pinto came up to Dr. Huggins after the lecture and said, "Would you like me to show you why those patients did not get better?" And of course, Dr. Huggins said, "Yeah, sure, I'd like to know." "They did not get better because you did not remove the mercury fillings from their mouth." As Dr. Huggins likes to tell the story, he proceeded to tell Olympio Pinto all of the important factors about why a dental amalgam is perfectly safe. All of the points that I was taught in dental school. You had the gamma phase, the beta phase, the amalgam phase. Yeah, right, all the phases that made amalgam safe. And when Dr. Hal Huggins was done speaking, then Olympio Pinto began to tell him the truth about mercury amalgam fillings. And then Dr. Huggins began to change his mind. He continued to research the subject, and when he came back to the United States, he decided to do a little experiment on his own. He was always very knowledgeable about nutrition, so he did some blood chemistries on his patients who he had already counseled on nutrition, did some blood chemistries on them, removed their mercury fillings, did some blood chemistries on them again the second time, and lo and behold, when he saw the changes on them, he was very excited. Well, he wrote it up as a beautiful paper, took it to the American Dental Association, and said, "I have some great news to tell you. I've discovered that mercury comes off the silver fillings." He just knew they were going to be really interested in what he had to say. They were not interested in what he had to say. See, what Dr. Hal Huggins did not know at that time, and what I did not know until I met Dr. Huggins, was that the American Dental Association owns all the patents on amalgam. So they weren't too interested in hearing what he had to say. That didn't stop him, though, because he's absolutely one of the bravest men that we have in this century. He continued to research. He continued to take mercury fillings on his patients. His patients continued to get better. He continued to teach other dentists, anybody who would listen, to how to properly remove amalgam so that the patient does not get sicker. Yep, we lost a giant recently, Dr. Hal Huggins. I began studying with Dr. Huggins in 1992. I continued studying with him. I wanted to learn everything that he knew. I had a meeting with him approximately a year ago. And he told me that of all of the students that he ever had, he had none that had followed the Huggins protocol the way I did. And he had made the decision to pass the baton to me. I have that conversation on video.
Hi, I'm Dr. Hal Huggins, one of the pioneers in finding out what's wrong with Mercury fillings and root canals, and looking at the people who are following in my footsteps. I got pretty good sized feet, and one person who seems to be able to fill those shoes is Dr. Blanche Grube. I have a habit of coming up with nicknames for people, and it was probably 10 years before she found that behind her back I called her Blanchy Poo. I'm not sure how she felt about it then, but she considers it as a compliment today. That's the advantage of being an elder statesman. You get away with things like that. But 20 years ago, she didn't know it, but she had leukemia, which she found when going through one of my seminars, and I asked her how many root canals she had, and she said, "You don't know me. How do you know I've got root canals?" I said, "Well, you've got leukemia, which can come from mercury, but in your case, your chemistry indicates there's more going on than that, so it looks like it's probably root canals." Well, she was rather offended because she said, "Well, I always planned on going to my grave with 32 teeth." And I said, "That could be arranged. The way you're going, that's going to happen real soon." She did not realize she had leukemia, but somehow or another, when you've got a problem and find out how to work through the problem, have it go away, which it has been for 20 years now, you become appreciative of not only the person, but the technology. And she has taken this technology and studied it and refined it to the point that by now she has surpassed my abilities and what I can do there. And I'm very happy to be able to pass the baton to Dr. Blanche Grube to carry on and honor the statement that we both made when we graduated about first, do no harm, but second, reverse the harm that's been done. So Blanche, here's the torch. Let it keep you warm. Let it save millions of lives through not only your work, but from your passing junior torches on to other people whose interest is in developing dentistry into the true concept of oral medicine. Oral medicine is where you combine the two, dentistry and medicine, where they meet, and when you can use both technologies, then you can turn around much of the incurable disease. Have at it, Blanchy Poo.
So, after this famous meeting with Dr. Hal Huggins and Dr. Olympio Pinto, they became fast friends, and Dr. Olympio Pinto became the mentor to Dr. Hal Huggins. Many years went by, and Dr. Blanche Grube came along and began to study with Dr. Hal Huggins, and he became my mentor. And then a year and a half ago, I decided to visit Brazil because I wanted to meet this Dr. Olympio Pinto that I had heard so much about. And it was a wonderful trip. I did go to Brazil. I had a wonderful trip. I not only got to meet Dr. Olympio Pinto, but I got to see photos of his family and his father and get to see the whole history of dentistry in Brazil at the turn of the century. It was a wonderful, wonderful trip. Dr. Hal Huggins wanted to come to Brazil. He wanted to see his old friend again. He wasn't physically feeling up to the trip, so instead he produced a video.
I have a twin brother. Twin brother is about 4 years older than I am. He was raised in Rio de Janeiro. I was raised in Colorado Springs. And that's Dr. Olympio Pinto. I met him in 1973 in the midst of an argument that I was lecturing in Mexico City, and I had presented some cases of gum disease, and I knew everything from the biochemical standpoint about how to correct the gum disease. And I showed a case, the starting and the finishing, and they were the same. And I pointed out that it didn't always work, and I didn't know why. And you, Dr. Pinto, came up to me afterwards and said, that's because mercury is coming out of the fillings. And I argued with you. I said there's the alpha phase, the gamma phase, the delta phase, all these things that I had been taught in school about how mercury was tightly bound within the filling. It's not. I apologize to you for arguing, and yet when I shut up and started listening is when I started learning. And you taught me to use the chemistry as a guideline as to whether what I was doing was right or wrong, whether it was improving the patient or making them worse. Definitely placing the amalgam made them worse. As a result of what you did to me at that time, thousands upon thousands of people have been helped. I know they gave you grief, they gave me grief, but between the two of us, we have taught hundreds and up into the thousands of people who have treated multiple thousands of patients and maybe turned on a few more dentists to not placing amalgam. Now about half the dentists in the United States don't. How many diseases did not happen? Because of what you did for me. Someplace up in the sky there's a big scorecard. And every time someone gets cured, reversed from one of these diseases, you get the points. Every time someone does not get an amalgam or a root canal, we share the points. Hey, thank you. You made my life what it is. And if you put the miseries and the glories together, it was worth it. I've been asked, would you do it again? And I say, I would not advise anybody to follow the path that I did. But between you and me, yeah. I would do it again. I thank you. You gave me the life that I have, that I enjoy. Thanks, buddy. Twin brother.
In August of 2011, I had the opportunity to have a very extensive interview with Dr. Hal Huggins. I got to ask him a lot of questions about his career and how he was able to just kind of hang in there all those years after taking such abuse from the American Dental Association and the Colorado State Board. So we have this all on video, and I'm sure there's some of you who would like to partake of that conversation and sit back and relax and feel as if you were there listening to us. Dr. Huggins, you are probably best known for your work in dental mercury. What has led you to have this lifelong passionate journey?
I suppose the thing that gave me the passion for it was the first few cases where I took out amalgam and saw the results. And these were so dramatic and traumatic to my soul, I guess, that I can't even talk about them now 35 years later without breaking down and crying, and I'm not going to do that on your film.
Okay.
Okay.
Good. Why is mercury so bad?
Oh, well, the point is it is that bad. I think probably because its primary job in life is to kill. If you look at OSHA and all these other organizations with 4 letters that come up with the safe level of mercury, I asked a toxicologist where I was taking a course in toxicology, I said, which one's right? What is the safe level of mercury? And he says, 1 atom can kill 1 cell. You tell me the safe level.
There really is no safe level.
There is no safe level. It has 15 different ways that it can kill a cell. It can work on the cell membrane, it can penetrate, can work, you know, from your work in biology, there are all kinds of little factories that are going on within a cell. It can take out any one of them or any combination of them, the result of which is a dead cell. And if it doesn't do that, then it can come in and do gene deletions in the DNA. And when you get a DNA this long and you take a piece out, either you're going to get sick or your children, grandchildren, so on are going to carry that deletion forever. It never corrects.
So mercury actually changes who we are.
It changes who we are in the aspect of making us susceptible to disease or creating disease, but when it changes the DNA, it is changing who the race is. And
the whole human race.
Yeah, from there on, if you live. Some of these deletions are serious enough from root canals or mercury, either one, and you put them together and you got a double whammy. And that never recovers.
I remember from my own experience the inability to read a sentence completely without going back to the beginning, or to read a paragraph and have any comprehension whatsoever. And that was at a time when I had a mouth full of mercury fillings. So the mercury was actually changing the way my brain functioned.
That's right, your perception.
My perception.
And would you believe that you're the only person in the world who's been affected that way?
No, I don't believe that.
You probably felt so at the time, or hoped so, but no. There are hundreds of thousands of people who have the same problem. You read a sentence, then you go back and you read it again, and it's a brand new sentence.
That's
and then you read it again, and I don't remember having read that. And that changes very shortly after the amalgam is taken out, if the amalgam is taken out in the proper sequence, if you put in a compatible material, which is, I took a postdoc master's in immunology a few years ago at the University of Colorado, and we developed a system there of identifying what dental materials are safe for you and what are safe for me.
And they're not necessarily the same.
They're not the same material. It depends on what our immune system has seen. You know, there are people who go wherever it is we're killing people, Iraq and Iran and Vietnam, and my day it was the Second World War. When you get into other countries, there are other challenges to the immune system which alters the way you accept dental materials. So how do you know what a safe dental material is? You have to have a blood test on you and a blood test on me, and then we both know. But change those blood tests, and you can create new diseases just from the dental materials, the white fillings that are supposed to be so safe. Some of them are, some of them are not. About 60% of them are not. But again, not the same 60% for you that it is for me.
It makes so much sense to do a compatibility test prior to having dentistry.
No. That's only for people who are interested in their health.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I would think all dentists would want to do that test for their patients prior to putting a material in their mouth. It seems to me that it's no different than having a food allergy test before you go to a restaurant.
Well, except if you go to a restaurant and you eat something you're allergic to, you may get real sick. You may get food poisoning or something like that, but next week you're okay. The dental material is there. It's permanent. It's there next week. It's there next year. Yeah, it's different.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So now you've already touched upon your so-called Huggins protocol that so many people have heard about. And there are many different facets to the Huggins protocol.
Yeah, it was developed on mistakes.
So you're telling me that you've developed the Huggins protocol by trial and error within your own practice?
Yeah. And my patients were real anxious to participate.
Right.
Maybe hard to believe, but it got to the point where the patients knew I was always taking postgraduate work, and
Right.
you know, maybe they hadn't been in 6 months. They'd come in and say, "What are you going to experiment on me this time about?"
Cool.
So it was kind of fun. I enjoyed my practice. But at that time, you take something like multiple sclerosis, kind of hard to turn around. And so when we got up to being able to turn around 10% of them, hey, that was pretty good. But today, we're up over 90% with ability to turn those around. Why is that? Because even at 10%, we were making a bunch of mistakes, or we didn't know about things.
Right.
And one of the big things was taking the fillings out according to their electrical charge. Fillings are like little tiny batteries. They have positive charge and negative charge. And if you take out the negative charge fillings first, it stimulates 4 endocrine glands that say, hey, let's heal. And if you take out the positive charge filling first, it stimulates the opposite 4 endocrine glands that say, let's make this person a degenerate. Let's degenerate the body. We have to have all going on all the time. We're not the same person we were a week or two ago, because a lot of the cells have degenerated, gotten too old, they're thrown away, and we regenerate, bringing new ones in. All right, we have to stimulate the regeneration cycle and slow down the degeneration cycle. And one of the ways to do that is to take out the fillings in the proper order. Then you have to put in the proper filling. We were just talking about the compatible filling has to be put in.
Right.
Well, the biggest change was in the electrical sequential removal, it's called, because that took us from about 10 up to 50%. Then putting in a compatible material gives us another 20%. And this gives us another 5%. And this gives us, and so we found that, taking out the positive fillings was a mistake. So we take out the negative fillings, and now we've got an improvement. So this has been 42 years of, trial and error, but I always had the blood chemistry to let me know whether I was right or wrong.
So are you saying that there's electricity in our teeth if we have metal fillings in our mouth?
there's electricity in your teeth whether you have fillings or not. It's pretty low charge.
Right.
But then when you put a filling in, you have a battery. You have dissimilar metals, two metals, or in case of dentistry, a whole gob of metals in here together in something that conducts an electrical current. What'll do that? Saliva will do that.
Right.
So you've got a battery. And just mercury alone forms 16 different corrosion products on the surface of the filling. So you have really a lot of microscopic little batteries in there, each one of them kicking out mercury and copper and silver and tin and zinc and all these massive combinations of the same thing.
So it's a good idea for a dentist to measure the amount of electricity in somebody's mouth prior to taking their fillings out. That's what I hear you saying.
If you don't want the patient to end up with a disease worse than what they've got, yes.
Right.
Because that will trigger a disease. If you trigger the degeneration and push down the regeneration, that equals disease.
So much of your protocol involves good nutrition and supplementation.
Now this brings up the question, what is good nutrition?
That's right.
Because what's good nutrition for you is not necessarily good nutrition for me.
Correct.
And here again, we have to depend on the blood chemistry to let us know. Because the blood chemistry, there is, there's a normal range, which is 95.56% of the population by definition. Population is mainly composed of the people who came to the hospital and had their blood drawn before they died.
Those are sick people.
And that's what you're comparing yourself to.
Huh.
But within this, there's a very narrow range that I call the stability range or the stability point. And a good example of that is red blood cells. You have the level for males and then the level for those females down here. They don't make red blood cells because they do this funny thing every month. Body doesn't know how to deal with it. Yes, the body does know how to deal with it. It's just that upon exposure to mercury and the toxins from root canals, a male compensates for that by getting more red blood cells, and the female compensates by shrinking back on the red blood cells. But when you go through the if it's a compatible material, if it's taken out sequentially, if you use the rubber dam, if you protect the patient while you're going through the dental revision, then the highs come down and the lows come up and they shrink into a stability point. So there's not a difference between males and females. There's not a difference between red and yellow and black and white. There's some difference in age. Babies have some different things than people who are 16, 18 after you've gone through puberty. Pretty much worldwide, perfect is perfect. You don't need ranges that are dependent upon this hospital and that hospital and this hospital and so on. The human body has a target. And if you can use your blood chemistry for that target, then you know when you're coming out with the right nutrition. I used to require about 16 ounces of protein a day. And there are people who will maintain exactly the same chemistry on 2 ounces of protein a day. Well, then when I got to be an old man, I find I didn't need quite as much as I did. So now I'm down to about 12. But the chemistry stays the same when you're on what's called your ancestral diet, what your ancestors were eating 2,000 years ago, not 2 generations ago, but thousands of years ago. When you decided to be born, which is maybe taking a little poetic license, you went up to this genetic shelf and you picked things off of that which made you. But you're taking half of the genetics from your mother, half from your father, who took it half from their mother and half from their father and half from that. So when you put this together from 2,000 years ago, maybe somebody 2,000 years ago had red hair. And 2,000 years ago on the other side of the family had red hair. And nobody had any until you come along and bingo, you have red hair. So that is true for your nutritional requirements as well. How much carbohydrate, protein, and fat do you need? I don't know, but your chemistry knows, and if you know how to interpret the chemistry, then you can find the answer. And when you're putting in the right nutrition, you're putting in the raw materials you need for healing. And that's what this is all about. Get rid of the toxicity that's creating a challenge to your immune system, to your heart system, to your nervous system. When you get rid of that properly, then you can bring in the proper nutrition. And let's see, there's something else in there. Oh yeah, detoxification, which is a big problem because most people get into over-detoxification too much, too fast. Excretion is what counts. The body can eliminate only a certain amount of toxins per day. Now, detoxification is relatively easy. You can release mercury from the brain, from the liver, from the bone, but just because you have taken an atom of mercury out of the bone, circulated around, stuck it in the brain,
that's not detoxification.
That's
just moving from one part of the city to another.
Oh, that's right.
I think it was Dr. Tom Levy who said to detox the body is to retox the body.
Detoxification is retoxification. Right. Exactly. Right. So you have to be very careful with detoxification. And doing it before, a lot of people want to detox before they have their fillings out. Okay, that's like getting into the shower and getting a towel and starting to dry off while you're standing under the shower. Doesn't hurt anything, but it's not doing you much good either.
All right. Getting back to nutrition, the food that our ancestors ate 2,000 years ago is very different from the food that we're eating today. Most people,
no kidding.
Most people purchase food that is processed, that is already cooked when they bring it home. They take it out of the package and they throw it in a microwave. So that's very, very far from the nutrition that our ancestors ate 2,000 years ago.
That's right. So nutrition is not something you can cover in 5 or 10 seconds.
Right.
When you look at the chemistry and you talk to the patient, interview them, find out how much carbohydrate, fat, protein they're eating, look at their chemistry, see what they're doing with it.
Right.
This can take several hours. It takes me several hours to go over that with a patient.
So again, it's important to go to a dentist that knows something about nutrition.
Well, either that or a physician who has the time to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the two.
We can't leave them out entirely, but then, of course, historically, dentists have always been the ones who have led the trail in nutrition, and physicians have always led the trail in drugs. So.
Interesting. You were at one time very active in the Weston A. Price Foundation?
Yes, and the Price Pottinger Foundation. Right? There are 2 foundations for Weston Price.
Right, that do a very good job of explaining what real nutrition is to patients. I very often tell my own patients, when they go to the grocery store, they should try to avoid the middle of the store. Shop around the perimeter. Do your fruits and vegetables, then go to your meats, and then go to your dairy. And the only time you're allowed in the middle of the store is if you're in need of toilet paper. That you have to get in the middle of the store. Right. And if they stick to that, they'll probably stay pretty healthy. But
since you mentioned toilet paper, that's another mercury exposure.
Oh, no.
Now, to talk people into stopping using toilet, that would be difficult. But much of the toilet paper is made from recycled paper.
Right.
And the toilet paper from recycled paper has to be cleaned up. You don't know what's in it. So what can kill everything? Mercury can kill everything. So you put mercury in it. And you put that in areas of the body that are very highly absorptive.
Right.
There are companies that make toilet paper without mercury. The only one I know of is Charmin. I don't know if we're supposed to talk about that, but yeah, Charmin does make toilet paper without mercury. There are probably others that do too. I don't know.
Okay. I have often heard you say that it's important for patients to have something called conscious sedation. while having their dentistry completed in one day. Can you tell us why that's important?
Yeah, because I'm a chicken.
Oh, so am I. That's one thing we have in common.
I mean, I go to the dentist routinely, usually about every 10 years. But that's not because I particularly enjoy it. Hey, I know what goes on in the dental chair. Yeah. But with conscious sedation, I've had it once, and the only thing I remember is that, okay, they got the vein, and then somebody says, you can get up now. And it was over. I have no memory of what's in between. Now, I think it's important that you remember your first kiss, but I don't think it's important that you remember your trip to the dentist.
That's probably right.
Yeah. But I don't care how tough you are. When you get in the dental chair, you're going to have what's called the white knuckle experience. You're hanging on to that chair. And that means you're releasing adrenaline. That means your healing is slowed down. But if you have conscious sedation, hey, you don't really care what they're going to do. And so you are relaxed, and pain medication is a fraction of what it is. The need for pain medication is reduced. Well, pain medication also slows down healing.
Right.
So why do something that's going to slow down healing and give you pain? But the conscious sedation, I go into offices and tell people about nutrition. I really prefer not to go into an office that does not have conscious sedation available. There are a few people who don't want it, and I can't figure out why. I mean, they're a whole lot tougher than I am. But it's just such a much nicer situation. And there's another thing. There are ways to injure a patient while you think you're doing them a good deed.
How is that?
And if you take the fillings out in the wrong sequence, okay, this is one of them. But, I took 4 years out to take a course, a degree in immunology a few years ago. And I fell in love with the immune system. I have not only a great respect for it, but a great love for it. And don't mess with a person's immune system, or you're going to have to answer to me.
Okay.
It's kind of the way I feel about it. I'm very protective of it. And if you have somebody in the chair for the dental procedures, I mean, getting in, getting the napkin on, and so on, that doesn't count. But when
the drill starts
up, okay, the clock starts ticking. And you go to 2 hours, and the immune competence starts going down. So if you're in the middle of removing a tooth and you're up in the sinus or the eyeball or someplace up there, best you finish what you're doing, but you can probably do that in 15 minutes. They don't really get into the eyeball. I just said that. But take 2 hours and 15 minutes. And after that, you're starting to do damage to the immune system, so make your appointments 2 hours. But in conscious sedation, you can keep them under all day and go in and get everything done at once, and the immune system celebrates, and the next days people feel great.
Right. Well, it makes sense that the adrenal glands would only be able to produce their hormones for a certain period of time and then run out.
They get tired.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So let me get this straight. If a person is under the influence of conscious sedation, then they can spend several hours in a dental chair. They can spend a whole day in a dental chair.
You could say 12 hours without, we've had anesthesiologists, MDs with an additional 4 years and do this, and I don't think we've ever kept anybody under 12 hours, but they say, no big problem. But instead of going 2, 4, 6, 8 hours, you don't have to have the time in between to put on the napkin and get in and out of the chair and so on. You can just go right through. So 6, 7, 8 hours, there are very few cases that cannot be accomplished in 6 or 8 hours. We had one case, I remember, gal walked up to the desk, and the receptionist said, "Okay, you want to write me a check for that?" And she says, "I will when I'm finished with the dentistry." And she said, "You're finished with the dentistry?" And she says, "No, my appointment's at 8 o'clock, and I'm here for that appointment," and so on. I said, "Well, look at the clock," and it was 4 o'clock. She said, "Something wrong with your clock." I said, "No, there's something wrong up here with you. You've already had your dentistry done." She said, "No, I haven't. I'm here to have my dentistry done today." I said, "You had a mouthful of amalgam, right? You open your mouth, you see all this black stuff in there?" Mm-hmm. I said, "Go in the restroom, open your mouth, and look." And she looked, and there is no more black stuff in there.
And she couldn't believe she had already had the work completed.
She couldn't believe. That, to me, is one of the funniest stories I've heard, and it's probably, the only time that's ever happened. But it does show that that sort of thing can happen, that you don't have the memory of what you went through. Right. It's the end of the day, you're not exhausted, and especially the next day. Right. You're in a whole lot better. Now, if you're going to do it without conscious sedation, you can do one quadrant in 2 hours, and then you wait 48 hours before you start another one. Right. And you do that, and then you wait 48 hours for another one. And so we used to do this 25 years ago. We didn't have conscious sedation. Right. So you've got a long program relative to being able to do everything in one day.
Right. When I studied acupuncture, we learned about the meridians on the body, and learned that the meridians have, you could say, a twin or a matching meridian on the opposing side of the body.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Divide the body down the middle.
Correct. And when there's injury to part of the body, the meridians on the opposing side help to heal that. Mm-hmm.
When with Feldenkrais, you go in and teach the good side what you want it to do, and the injured side learns from that.
Correct.
I'm not sure I understand all that, but I've seen it work too many times.
But with conscious sedation, you can work on both sides of the body.
That's right.
And not worry about having one injured side not being able to respond to the other.
You do not cross the midline. This is the midline down the middle.
Correct.
And if you're working without conscious sedation and you cross over the midline, the patient's going to pay the price somehow or another, maybe a little bit of discomfort or a lot. But you don't do that. But with conscious sedation, you can do them upside down, backwards.
So conscious sedation has really solved a lot of problems.
Uh-huh. It really has.
Really?
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
What has your recent work with DNA sampling shown as far as root canals and the bacteria that are hiding behind the root canals?
You sure you want an answer to that?
Short one.
Well, I am approaching my 50th year in dentistry here in a few months. And what I have learned with DNA has been the most challenging, the most rewarding. I've had a lot of things open up vistas to me. The Mercury opened up vistas, the nutrition did. The root canals were real scary, and now when I look at DNA, I think this is what pulls it all together. And if you pull all these things in, you can explain things that you couldn't explain before. How come I've got this and I've got that and so on? Doctor, what do I do? Why did this happen? And I have to say, I guess God hates you. There's just no other explanation. There is another explanation. And that is that these sterile teeth, the dentist sterilizes.
Sterilized teeth, correct. Yeah, they're supposed to be sterile.
He's sterilizing a column of air in the middle of the tooth. Oh, but if you use ozone, if you use laser, it goes through the dentin tubules, it does all these things. Take the tooth out and look at it with DNA, or even test the DNA around the tooth, and you find out,
not sterile.
Not sterile. I called the Society for Orthodontics some years ago, back in about 92.
Correct.
And I said, do you have anything that proves that root canal teeth can be sterilized? Oh, yeah, we have hundreds of articles. I said, I'd like to buy 100 of them. I'd like to read them. I want to see it. I got a curiosity here. Because these people in acupuncture and acupressure are saying that the root canal messes up the meridian, some
Right.
invisible electric wire that I can't see in here. But I want to be able to tell them, hey, root canals are safe. So I'd be happy to pay for it. We'll send you 100 articles at no charge. Thank you. So I read all 100 articles and I abstracted them. And there's not one of them that showed that root canals were sterile. Now, many of them said root canals are 20 or 90% successful. They said root canals are 95% successful. They say root canals are 97% successful. They say 87% of the root canals tested have bacterial infections in them.
But they're successful.
What's the definition of successful?
Exactly, they're
And
successful.
then others say that you take out a root canal tooth and you've got a bacteremia. Well, what? That means bacteria are going from the tooth into the bloodstream. I thought the tooth was sterile.
Right.
It's dead. Now, the powers, whatever that is, in dentistry don't like me to use the word dead. I said, what should I call it? Non-vital.
That's the same as dead.
According to the dictionary, non-vital means dead. No. Okay, we're talking about liability issues. Let's put
Right.
it on the line here.
But you're not finding the same type of bacteria in every root canal, are you? No, you're finding different ones.
Root canals, you know, if you take just one bacterium, like the one for diphtheria, one for botulism or something like that,
Right.
that can give you a lot of grief. But if we add all of them up that we've found in root canals so far, we have found 53. And cavitations are another thing. This is where you take out teeth, especially wisdom teeth. Take out wisdom teeth, they never heal. You got a socket in there, you got a hole in the bone that's lined with bacteria. Here we find 82 different bacteria. So far, we're still adding little bacterium. We had a little problem where somebody broke into the laboratory I was using, destroyed a bunch of my samples. Nobody else's samples but mine. So I figured, you know, I'm in the crosshairs with somebody. So I built my own laboratory.
Very good.
And here we can add a few more things. Do you want me to scare you?
Sure.
Yeah, okay, it sure scared me.
Sure.
Do you know anything about biblical history?
Yes.
There was a disease that was discussed in the Bible. Yeah, begin with an L.
Leprosy.
That's it,
That's
leprosy.
right.
Yeah, leprosy. Do we still have leprosy?
Yes, we do.
running around? Most people don't know that.
There's not a lot, but there is still some leprosy.
Oh. When they went to the high copper amalgam, which puts out 50 times more mercury than before 1976, the incidence of leprosy went up 400%.
Very interesting.
And so I wonder if it's in root canals and cavitations. Well, there's one way to find out. So you get the stuff to study leprosy, and in root canals we find it 20% of the time.
Whoa, that is very interesting.
So if you've seen 5 or 6 patients in one day who have root canals,
Right.
one of them's got leprosy in there. Well, why don't you see the signs of leprosy? Well, you see little things, you know, breaking out on the chest, breaking out on the face, a few little symptoms that if they were a whole lot worse might be called leprosy. But the bug sits there until it is stimulated. And this is one of the things we're doing research on now. What stimulates the bug, the bacterium, to produce that toxin? Because they can sit there for years without producing the toxin. But we have found things that stimulate it, and I'm
Interesting.
still in the research area of that. But there's another thing that is scary, it is bad, but there is an easy answer. Amos and Andy, years ago, when I was a kid, I'd listen to Amos and Andy.
I remember Amos and Andy.
And what was their recommendation concerning your teeth?
6 months.
Brush your teeth twice a day
Okay.
and see your dentist twice a year. And that
Right.
developed the 6-month recall at
That's
dentistry.
right.
That's where the science behind where that came from.
That's right.
Are you familiar with the term pH?
Yes.
Yeah, pH, this is the acid content.
Right, the amount.
Acid, what's the opposite of acid?
Alkaline?
Base?
Base,
Alkaline?
right.
Yeah. Okay. The saliva is a different pH, different acidity,
Right.
basic balance from blood.
Right.
And people say, well, these bacteria sit there in the mouth and they don't create any problem. That's true. But let's do something like see your dentist twice a year and get your teeth cleaned.
With no protection.
Yeah. What if you clean? I mean, you use these things, they're sharp. I remember
right.
having to sharpen those little things. And if the gums have any infection at all in them, they're going to bleed. Bleeding opens up a two-way street. If blood can come out, bacteria can go in.
Correct.
The bacteria from the mouth go in the bloodstream, and in the bloodstream it's a different pH. And from the studies in DNA, if you want to turn on the genes, which means flip the switch that turns on the lights, that turns on the machinery that makes toxins, there are several things you can do. One is change pH. As soon as the pH goes above 7, and in the blood it's 7.3, 7.35, all of a sudden that bacteria has been sitting in your mouth for years, not causing a problem.
Right. That was inactive, then becomes active.
It becomes active in producing toxins. And where do the toxins go when they hit your bloodstream?
Throughout the whole body.
Throughout the whole body. Yeah.
Interesting.
So there is a solution to this. And that is the minute the dentist gets through with cleaning your teeth with a hygienist, you run, don't walk to the nearest men's room, women's room, and I carry a little thing of salt with me because salt is a big thing in nutrition. There are a lot of salts that are not good, so I actually don't have it. I do have it. I carry this little thing of salt with me. Put some in your palm of your hand, lick it, and you will salivate right away.
Right.
And then take a little bit of water and aggressively, because the salt will kill those bacteria before they can get into the bloodstream and start creating disease.
Interesting.
And it will also stop the bleeding. So stay there for a minute or two and do several rinses. I mean, I'm paranoid about this, yes, because that's all I see is people who got sick because of dental materials. So, I'm very biased about this. But these diseases ruin people's lives.
Right.
I don't like that. And if all you have to do is rinse your mouth with salt water, hey, rinse your mouth with salt water aggressively. And that will kill, salt. Did you ever get a sore throat?
Yes.
You gargle with salt water. How long before your throat feels better?
Right. Immediately.
That fast.
Dr. Huggins, you had written a book called The Price of Root Canals. And in that book you talked about the experience of Weston Price and how he came to the conclusion that root canals could be deadly. Would you like to talk about that?
I suppose, since that's about where my life is spent now. Right. Because up until a certain period in time, by my own modest admission, I was pretty good at doing root canals. I did lots of them. And now I only hope that St. Peter has Alzheimer's.
And he doesn't remember, right?
Yeah, because I do remember. And there have been times in which I have done root canals on people and they have become ill, and then years later they found out there was a way to become unill. And they came back to me, and we completed the cycle.
Good.
So I caused the disease, and I reversed the disease, except in some cases, like leukemia, I caused the disease, and there was no reversal because I didn't know what I had done at that time that brought about the death. But I never forget about that. It's always there. And that's the way Price was, too, because he knew what root canals could do. Yes, with a microscope, he found the same bacteria that I'm finding. Right. In fact, for the first 15 years, I couldn't add one word to the material that Price came up with. See, he was working with Mayos back in the late probably 8, 9, 10, because it's about 1909, 1910 that I'm finding some of his writings. On his deathbed, he asked a friend of his, said, you know, I'm real happy with what I did with nutrition. He has written what is still the classic of nutrition book. And he said, but I could not convince dentistry to stop root canals. See if you can find somebody who could be stimulated to carry on my work, and give him the material that's in that trunk over there. 40 years later, that was given to me. Changed my life again.
Right.
Changed a lot of people's lives.
Right.
And that's what my life is totally dedicated to right now, is informing the public that I do not feel it's proper. I have been told that the Dental Association has now applied a quota to dentistry to do 30 million root canals a year. They wanted to do that by the year 2000, which they accomplished by the year 1999. 30 million root canals means 30 million infected teeth out there, because even though they say they sterilize the teeth, from DNA we have found 100% are contaminated with some of the world's worst pathogens, which are bacteria that create pathology, disease. And we're talking about multiple sclerosis, we're talking Lou Gehrig's disease, leukemia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's. There's several others in here that are all classified as autoimmune diseases that have their origin in either mercury, the toxins from root canals, or when they get together, they play off of each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So Price stayed in this because working with the people at Mayo's, they would take out a root canal tooth in somebody who had X disease, and they would implant that under the belly of, or under the skin in the belly of a rabbit. And in most cases, the rabbit would develop the same disease that the human had. But this was from the microscopic standpoint at autopsy, because they always died, looking at the tissues, the liver and the heart and the lungs and so on, exactly the same as it was in the patient. Right. I said exactly, but when the disease was there, it was exactly the same disease. The only one that hit 100% was heart attacks, heart disease. Heart disease you could transmit from the human to the animal 100% of the time. Now they would do conventionally 30 animals. They would take one tooth and they would plant it in one animal until he died, and then take it out, same one, put it in another one until he died, take it out. Do that with 30. They did a total of 60,000 rabbits. That's a lot of research when you consider all the blood tests, all the pathology slides, everything else that went with it. That's pretty substantial proof. It would take millions of dollars to duplicate the research that Price and Mayo's did at that time.
So am I correct in saying that there is no one disease that a root canal will cause, but that it lowers the effect of the immune system in a patient, so that whatever disease they're genetically programmed to get, they will get sooner? Is that correct?
Yes. That's pretty much correct, yes. There are some modifications in there. For instance, one bacteria, okay, what does a measles virus give you?
Measles.
What does the mumps virus give you?
Mumps.
Yeah.
Oh, this is an easy one. I like this test.
Yeah. Polio,
Right.
same thing. But some of these bacteria produce 2 toxins.
Right.
Some produce 3, 4, 5 toxins. Most of them are between 1 and 5, but there's one I remember hearing of that produces 95 different toxins.
Wow.
But if you have one that stimulates a toxin, it's going to give you a predisposition to attack a certain organ.
Right.
But what if it produces another one? Predisposition is toward another organ.
Right. And isn't it true that the body uses
Can give
enzymes?
you both.
Isn't it true that the body uses enzymes to break down these toxins? And those very same enzymes, if the patient has mercury in their body, those enzymes are now non-functioning because they're hooked up with mercury.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the defense mechanism of the body, is to use these enzymes to break down the toxins. But now the enzymes aren't working because there's mercury involved also.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a double whammy for patients who have root canals and mercury fillings.
Because mercury is not the only thing that comes out of the filling.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
But another thing is interesting. Okay. So in a front tooth, you've got a central canal. Price showed something I was not taught in dental school, that there are auxiliary canals that go out from the center to the side of the tooth.
Correct.
How many? 2, 3, 4, 5?
Thousands.
No, 75 auxiliary canals.
But then you have dentinal tubules.
Then you have dentin tubules. There you have your
Right,
thousands. In fact, if you hooked each one of them together from just a single front tooth, it would be 3.5 miles long. You tell me how a chemical can get in all of this, or a laser or something.
Right.
It can't do it.
Well, as far as I know, lasers only travel in straight lines.
One of the funniest things I've ever had, and I have lost this x-ray, and I would give $1,000 to have that x-ray back, because to me, I saw a great deal of humor in it. Okay, here's this tooth, and here's the root. And what we were doing to identify the canals in it was put in a little bit of mercury.
Okay.
We put it in a centrifuge, and boom, we hit mercury all over the place. So you put it in, and you take the centrifuge and take your finger, and you do that.
Right.
And that's
Gently.
enough to force it through all those little canals. Okay, here comes the primary canal. Here's the bottom of the tooth, okay?
Right.
Okay, here comes the canal. It gets about right here, which is about 1/4 of an inch in the bottom. It turns around and comes up, then turns around and comes out over here on the side.
J-shaped, like the letter J.
Is that a J?
Right. Sort of.
Okay.
J with a tail.
You show me an endodontist who
Right.
can make that corner and make this
That's
corner
right.
and follow it up. You talk about impossible. That
Right.
really is impossible. But let's say it was possible to sterilize the canal and all the dentin tubules and
Right.
all the auxiliary canals in there. Then outside the tooth, holding the tooth to the bone, is the periodontal ligament. There are
Right, that's the
fibers-
ligament that holds the tooth to the bone.
Yeah, the tooth is not really attached directly to bone.
Right.
There are fibers that come out of the tooth and fibers that come out of the bone, and they intertwine to form this periodontal ligament. You got a whole lot more bacteria in that periodontal ligament than you had in the tooth.
So they could move right back into the tooth, even if it was sterile.
Mm-hmm.
How long do you think that would take?
Price showed 48 hours. He's got to
Okay.
remind me to come back to that.
All right.
But if we take the tooth out, and we take a burr and we cut out all the periodontal ligament fibers that are in the bone, we've got rid of the tooth. It took me many years. In fact, this was just 2 years ago. I decided, what's in the blood out here? How far does this infection actually go from the tooth through the tubules, through the ligament, into the bone? Oh man, that's going to be difficult. But we found a whole lot more bacteria outside the tooth. So every time you bite down, you're squirting that stuff in the blood around the tooth into your blood vascular system.
Is that why you've always said it's very important for a good surgeon to not only remove the root canal tooth, but then to remove an additional millimeter of bone and all of the ligament that held the tooth to the bone.
And now, as of the last few months, we've added another one, which nobody's ever really followed my instructions here, but they've never forgotten them. They get the idea. I say, grab the patient by the feet, hold him upside down and shake him and make that socket bleed.
Okay.
Because there are chemistries that I followed that would take 4 months before they would come back to where they belong. However, if we let the socket bleed for 5 minutes, which is, you're not going to need a transfusion because it's maybe a teaspoon of blood, but you want that teaspoon of blood to clean the bone around the socket area. Instead of having to wait 4 months, I see it change in 6 days. So it is important to stimulate that socket to bleed, even if you have to take the patient, shake it.
That would be difficult to do.
It's a good thing I don't practice dentistry anymore, isn't it?
Right, a good thing. So then it's very important that the dentist also not use epinephrine, because epinephrine is a vasoconstrictor, and that keeps the patient from bleeding. And, and holds everything in.
Keeps all the bacteria in there nice and warm.
Right.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, that's my own theory and my own belief system as to why there are so many cavitations. From all these people who have had wisdom teeth extracted, why do they all have 4 cavitations? And my own belief is that it comes from the use of epinephrine, which causes vasoconstriction of the blood vessels.
Absolutely.
Well, if you have the smallest of blood vessels constrict, and those are called capillaries, they close off altogether. And once those little capillaries close off altogether, then the cell that capillary is going to receives no oxygen whatsoever.
And how long does it take it to die?
34 seconds.
I think you're onto something here.
Yeah, I once asked Dr. Jerry Boku, who is probably the world leading pathologist.
He's a microbiologist, pathologist.
He's a pathologist, and he is the world's leading expert on bone pathology. I once asked him how long would it take for an osteocyte, which is a bone cell, to go without oxygen. And he said about 34 seconds. Well, that's interesting. Well, then we are creating in dentistry a lot of dead bone cells when we give a patient anesthetic with epinephrine.
Dead bone cells. Something in the past I've heard about the sirens in the sea, these gals who call the sailors to come in. Necrotic bone is like that.
Right.
It calls Streptococcus and Staphylococcus.
It attracts them.
Particularly staph. If they're floating around in the bloodstream, they go right to that necrotic bone that's calling for them. Yeah. And those are the worst.
So that's a problem created by dentistry.
We see Clostridium tetani, we see botulism, we see, as I mentioned, leprosy.
Right.
Who's the worst one?
The one you have.
The one you have.
The one you have, right.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I've noticed myself, I've been in dentistry close to 40 years now, and I've noticed that in dentistry they're giving a lot of continuing education courses on how to do implants. And I suspect that the dental profession itself is recommending that you're sometimes better off extracting a tooth rather than do a root canal. You're better off extracting the tooth and doing an implant instead. Are there any problems with implants that are drilled into the bone marrow and left there?
In a word, yes.
Can you say at least 2 more words?
Don't do them.
Don't do them.
No, but there is a lot of money in it. There is a lot of education going that direction. Advertising in, what's that big newspaper, it goes everywhere, the USA Today. How much do you think a full-page ad in there cost?
Oh, I
Probably
bet a lot.
over $100.
I bet.
Yeah. I've seen full-page ads in there for implants.
Right.
So, yes, they are being pushed. Implants have an entrance into the mouth. The mouth has those bacteria in it that are harmless.
Right.
But when they see a manhole cover that's been removed, there's space enough for those bacteria to go down around an implant. And the further down they go, the more anaerobic. Ana means without.
Right.
Aerobic means oxygen.
Right.
So as it goes down, there's less and less oxygen, so these bugs become more and more pathological, more disease producing.
Right.
And the diseases I have personally seen there, I've been called in to see some of these patients. It's not pleasant. And getting out an implant is difficult because the body knows, well, it's like my professor in immunology said when, hey, I was pretty good at placing implants too. So I asked him about it. I've never forgotten his response. He said, anything implanted in bone will create an autoimmune disease. The only difference is the length of time. Oh, but I use titanium. I don't use nickel because that creates cancer, and we can do enough of that with the crowns in the mouth because they're made out of nickel.
Right.
And when is somebody going to unravel this very simple tale that toxic materials last a long time in the mouth? In fact, they last longer than the patient because they shorten the patient's life.
Right.
Is this important? Is this a health profession? Let's examine what we're doing. Years ago, we came out with a test for mercury, a patch test. Put the patch on and you do blood pressure, pulse, and temperature and a bunch of other things. And if you react, you shouldn't put amalgam in that person. The Dental Association made us stop it because that's for the real doctors. You have to send those people to a dermatologist. So I called the dermatologist. I said, can you test for mercury toxicity? He said, what's that?
What's that?
So no, they don't know how to test for mercury toxicity. It's very simple, but that had to be eliminated.
Right. Is there some way to test if a patient would be compatible with an implant?
Oh, well, with the metals, you would have an immunologic reaction, but that's a reaction to the immune system, which is autoimmune disease. Yes, you can do that. But if you have an implant, you can do the same thing as with a root canal tooth. You take, in dentistry, they use something called a paper point, which looks like a toothpick, but it's made out of paper, and then it is sterilized.
Right.
And you can just slip that under the gum tissue, about 1/16 of an inch, and it will suck up enough bacteria that through DNA examination we can see are some of the basic bacteria there.
Very good.
This is very non-invasive. You can put it there for a minute and bite on a popsicle stick.
Right.
You bite down and, hey, the bacteria down here at the end get squeezed when you bite down and squirt. They come up and bing, you can catch them up here.
So somebody could tell if their implant or their root canal was causing problems for them. Dr. Huggins, over the years, you have literally taught thousands of dentists how to do the dental revision properly. This question may hurt your feelings, but I'm going to get right to it. Why have so few of them followed the Huggins protocol strictly?
Fear.
That was simple.
Yeah, I could see that one coming.
Okay.
Yeah, that was not a curveball.
Okay.
Sure. Because if a patient asks a dentist, is mercury poisonous? And he says yes, he's going to find himself selling used cars tomorrow.
Right.
Because they will take your license. Now they can take your license by just sending you a letter saying your license is gone in 50 states. Don't bother to take other state licensure.
Right.
So, yeah. There are several things that have been done over the years to intimidate dentists, but taking the license is the primary thing, because if you're trained to be a dentist as a second occupation, you could be what?
Nothing.
Nothing. Dentistry is a very, very specialized area.
Right.
And you can't do anything. I mean, you got 8 years of college invested and thousands and thousands of dollars, then thousands of dollars in equipment, and one little piece of paper and it's all gone. It's lost.
Right.
And of course, what they did to me with radio and television worldwide and so on, it scared all the dentists into who were thinking about stopping poisoning their patients with mercury, made them go back to poisoning their patients with mercury so they could continue to poison their patients with mercury. Sad situation.
Yes.
But that's a situation. Yeah.
I remember receiving a letter from the American Endodontic Society telling me that if I recommended the extraction of root canals, they would have my license revoked for unethical behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And I really felt that all I was doing was telling the truth.
Yeah, but didn't that give you fear?
No.
Fear of losing your license?
No, I guess that's why I'm the only dentist that follows the Huggins protocol.
Oh.
Don't have the fear.
Okay. Yeah. And that's why now, this sounds a little something between mean and sarcastic, but it's how I really feel.
Mm-hmm.
I don't consider the dental association as a health profession.
Right.
Dentistry is a health profession. I remember when I went into it, the number of kids that I had a large children practice. I did a lot of orthodontics, and so I saw them a lot, and I would encourage them, and some of them did go into dentistry, and I told them why it was the greatest profession around, because you had so many different things you could do in dentistry. If you like surgery, if you like it in the hospital, you can do that. If you like
That's right.
the
It's
fire
never
room,
boring.
porcelain,
Never.
orthodontics has nothing to do with oral surgery. I mean, it was
Right.
fun. It was really nice. Until I found out about the toxicity. And I found out the absolute lack of care and concern on the part of the leaders of the association. Many of the dentists are really nice people. They don't want to hurt their patients.
But they don't know they're hurting their
They
patients.
don't have a choice. Well, that's
Right.
right. They don't know, for one thing. I think they would care, but their leaders do not care. So that's why I'm taking my information now to the public, because I know the profession is going to fight it tooth and nail.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah.
What about orthodontics? You mentioned orthodontics before. And, you know, we've spent so much time talking about mercury and talking about root canals, and there really hasn't been that much of a discussion about orthodontics and whether or not a lot of the materials used in orthodontics can be a problem.
Well, braces, the tin grin, as it is affectionately called, are generally made out of nickel.
Well, nickel is a carcinogenic.
What's carcinogenic mean?
Causes cancer.
Oh. I discovered that back in the early 90s, and I called the largest industry, the largest company manufacturing the orthodontic braces and so on, and I started to tell them what I had found. I said, I know who you are. What do you mean by that? Says, we follow every move you make. Says, I know more about the toxicity of nickel than you ever will. But from the financial standpoint, we have to lose 7 major cases against us before it would be financially feasible to go to another material.
Whoa,
So,
how sad.
yeah.
All has to do with finances.
But what does nickel do? All right, let's start out. You ready for this trip? This is where we have to have a confluence of dentistry to have it work out. But if we work backwards from the patient who has the problem back to where did the problem come from, it starts with the chrome crown. And many kids at age 2, their teeth are in and they look kind of funny because they're silver colored because they already have chrome crowns on them.
Right.
God didn't put them on there.
Right.
Dentistry put them on, and I have seen 20 chrome crowns put. When I was in dental school, there was a big deal about some kid they put under general anesthetic and put in 20 chrome crowns. That was
You're calling them
52.
chrome crowns, but they're nickel chrome crowns,
yes,
correct?
chrome crown is the cutesy name because there is a little bit of chrome in it.
Right.
But they're primarily nickel, which is carcinogenic. But does it give the little children cancer? Not very often.
Not that
but
day.
It sets up the immune system so that it says, that's a bad actor. And so the immune system develops a few defenses against that. And then along about age, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 in here, we put on the braces, which are made out of nickel. There are a few that aren't, but most of them do have nickel. This is a second challenge to the immune system to think about developing a carcinogenic activity. Then you get to be a lot older, like in your 30s, and you break off a tooth. And so they put on a crown made out of
nickel, porcelain fused to nickel.
Right. So that's the third, and this is my observation. I don't know how much the science is behind it, but there's certainly a lot of observation to show that many times it takes that third exposure where you end up with a root canal, and you were talking about these invisible electric wires, the meridians through the body. Well, I didn't used to believe in that, but I have seen so much of it, I can't deny it anymore. You do a root canal on the bicuspid, that's back here behind the big one, in a female. Well, okay, going to the end point. Females who have breast cancer. Over studies done in a period of like 40 years in Germany, and recently one came out in Belgium that was a short term, like 20 years. And from what I have seen in the last 15, if you have a root canal if you have a woman with breast cancer or a man, I've only seen one, but it does happen, there's a root canal on the bicuspid.
Correct.
Something about being in that meridian.
Breast meridian, correct.
Yeah. So you have had previous exposures to nickel, then you have the root canal and the chrome and the nickel crown usually put on it. Well, there are certain bacteria. We have now listed the top 10 bacteria found in the root canal tooth, and many of the physicians are beginning to get gutsy enough to say cancer is a bacterial infection. Well, that's not what I was taught in school.
Right.
Where does it come from? And the answer was,
they don't know.
They don't know. So maybe it is a bacterial infection. But the bacteria that we find alter the blood chemistry. And hey, that's my department.
That's right.
So I can watch the blood chemistry and tell you that, yeah, there's a connection between the changes in the blood chemistry, and you take the root canal tooth out, and the blood chemistry is going to change in a matter of a few days. Change to a more efficient chemistry.
Right.
And some of these people, if they're to the point of lumps and bumps and haven't had a mastectomy or something, that can reverse.
That's good news.
If you can reverse it, what caused it? Well,
Right.
the series, usually the chrome crown, the braces, and the nickel crown, but it doesn't have to be. What it does have to be is a root canal on the bicuspid 97% of the time over these 40-year spans that people have studied that in Europe.
Getting back to orthodontics, there are a lot of orthodontists that are using Invisalign, which is a non-metallic form of doing orthodontic
I like that
work.
because it puts a little pressure to the bone so that the teeth can move. And if you've got plenty of magnesium in the body, you move. Now I used to use a Crozat, a gold appliance that very gently move things out. But when you use the tin grin and you give it that, those teeth move right now. Well, if they move, you got a space over here, and you're mashed up against the bone over here, which will die so the tooth can move. But meanwhile, you got space on this side.
Correct.
Big enough for bacteria to go in. So not so much in a child, but you get up to older age, like 25 and above, and you do orthodontics in the 25 and the 40 and the 50-year-olds. The 40 is getting to be a popular age. You kids are out of the house.
And you now have the money to do it, right?
You got it, right. And the minute you move that, you've got a whole bunch of little cavitations, root canals. You've got a bunch of homes in here coming down the side of the tooth with those bacteria. and we have seen diseases there. And do you think I'm going to sit down to a nice-looking 40-year-old woman who's at the prime of her life and say, we're going to yank all your teeth out and give you false teeth?
That would not be good news.
It would not be good news, and she might beat me up if I tell her that.
Right.
So I'm stuck there. I don't know what to say. I have told people, if I feel that they're the type who shoots from the hip,
Right.
I'll tell them, I do not expect you to follow this recommendation, because it's not really a recommendation. It is just a statement of facts.
Right.
Do with it what you want, and whatever your decision, I love you either way. It's not a matter of my being judgmental about you, but it's my responsibility to let you know what's going on in your body. I mean, how many people smoke? Is there anybody who's an adult who smokes who doesn't know the dangers of smoking? But still, millions of people smoke. What does alcohol do? Oh, cocktails are really great for my body. Nobody really thinks that. Nobody really believes it.
Right.
But they still do it. It's their choice.
Right. But that's an informed consent.
That's informed consent, which does not exist in dentistry.
It just seems to me, with all of the potential problems that dental materials can cause in the body, it seems to me that the true only solution is prevention, is to catch children when they're young, give them the right nutrition and the right supplementation so that they never get a cavity to begin with.
Can this happen?
Yes.
Weston Price certainly proved it.
That's right.
In fact, Price did something. He went into one of the, I think it was the Samoan Islands back in the 20s, and somehow got permission to dig up graves and look at skulls. And the average age at death was someplace in the 70s, and he found one cavity per 1,000 teeth at the time of death.
That's all. Wow.
One per 1,000 teeth.
But these people were eating the natural foods that were found on the island.
Yeah.
No Twinkies, no pizza,
Their
no ice
ancestral
cream,
diet.
no Coca-Cola.
An assistant of mine went on one of these religious experiences where you go into the backwoods, went down into the backwoods of Belize, and she went with a bunch of dentists and so on. And they were there for 2 weeks, and what did they do?
They ate canned goods?
Extracting teeth.
Oh, okay.
That's all they did all day was extract teeth.
Uh-huh.
This may be troublesome, but just when you finally get to the village, I mean, they took a 4-wheel drive until they had to go to Mule, until the mule couldn't make it, and they had to go in by foot. And when they got to the village, here's a big sign, and it says, have a Coke and a smile.
Ooh.
And these kids would work all day to make enough money to buy one Coca-Cola. And their teeth were rotted off. And they did have records from the British. The British used to come over and do the same thing. And in the late 1800s, they didn't find cavities. They didn't do extractions. And now that's all these people would do, would be like shucking corn. They'd pull them out. And they got to quit at 6 o'clock at night, and said sometimes there were still 100 people in line. Next morning, they'd come in at 6 o'clock in the morning, and here's a line. People waiting to have their teeth taken out. Yeah. So the point being, if you're on your ancestral diet, and you're doing everything perfect, and you've done this for generations, and all of a sudden you put in something that messes up the chemistry, you have a super overreaction to it.
Right.
Because these people had super overreactions to gum disease, decay.
So prevention is the best cure.
That's right.
Dr. Huggins, I have always been surprised by the number of patients who we have seen in our office who have had very lengthy medical histories, and they never really make the correlation between the beginning of their symptoms and when they had the dentistry done. Could you comment on that?
Well, if it happened, in 36 hours, every time, it would
Right.
be easy to see.
That's right.
But some people, reactions occur before they get out of the dental office. Others, it may be a day, a week, a month. There's the 7, 14, 21 day cycle that
Right.
you have to honor when you're doing appointment scheduling.
Right.
There are immune cycles, and you have to fit into the immune cycles or they're going to create a disease. And then the other thing is, like we've been talking about, the bacteria sit there until triggered. And sometimes the trigger is like a severe cold, the flu, an immunization shot, death in the family.
Serious car accident could do it, or
Absolutely.
divorce.
Yeah.
Divorce is a big one.
And then these things will trigger the bacteria to release the toxin, and then you've got the problem. So
Right.
that's why it's kind of difficult to say, well, every time I fall down, I skin my knee. Well, that's easy enough to see. But it is a whole lot more difficult because it can be from hours to days to years before, bingo, finally the autoimmune disease, which most of them are, really show up.
So then that brings me to cavitations, or I like to put them a hole in your head. Most people
They
have
really
their most people have their wisdom teeth extracted,
Yeah.
or have teeth extracted at a very early age, usually in their teen years.
Yeah.
Yet they don't seem to develop symptoms from the cavitations until their late 40s or 50s. Now, I've looked at the bacteria inside cavitations, and we've looked at the actual diagnosis of the hole, and very often it's just an empty hole with bacteria in it and nothing else.
Yeah, it's not entirely empty. I mean, when you take the drill and you fall into it,
Right.
in the mouth, you go through 2 or 3 millimeters, and you feel like you have fallen in a big hole. But when
Right.
you get into cavitation, sometimes they're a quarter or half an inch big, and man, that drill just disappears in there, and the dentist, I'm sure the dentist's heart
Yes.
stops for a beat. With me, it was about the first 100 times I did them. You look at the x-ray, you can't really see anything on x-ray, and you're drilling and you don't know whether anything's there, and going a 16th of an inch feels emotionally like you're going 2 or 3 feet and then fall through. Oh, it's really there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And when it happens in the upper, you're always afraid that you're in the sinus. And then you look and you find out you're not in the sinus,
Yeah,
that there's
yeah.
actually a 14, 20 millimeter size hole
Yeah.
between the gums and the sinus.
Yeah.
And so these holes are empty, but what I'm getting at is, does it take a lot of time for the bacteria in these holes to become pathogenic?
No, it's a matter of whenever the trigger goes off, then within a few minutes,
Oh, okay.
the pathology starts. I mean, maybe you've got something in a cavitation or
Right,
root canal that would attack the liver.
right.
Okay, gets in the bloodstream, gets to the liver in a matter of a few minutes, but it may be months before it destroys the liver enough that you begin to see it on the liver function enzymes. Kidney is going to happen a whole lot faster.
Right.
Kidney has little bitty tubules in there, and things get caught in the kidney a lot easier than they get caught in the liver.
True, but isn't it true that you don't see changes in the blood chemistry until there's a lot of damage to the kidneys?
Oh yes, to kidney
Right.
you have to lose about 50% of kidney function before you see a drop in effectiveness of the kidney. Right.
So that's a lot scarier because this kidney does not regenerate the way the liver does.
That's right. You can cut out 6/7 of a liver and it'll totally regenerate to exactly the same shape it was. So it's pretty smart.
Right.
But I took a course in toxicology in one of the hospitals one time, and we had a 20-year-old probably who had died, and he had been given some medications and died. Well, what he had done was get into some drugs that took about 50% of the kidney to detoxify, and then he was given some medications that took 30% of the kidney function and 30% of the kidney
Wait a minute.
Okay,
wait a
30.
minute. That's about 110. You just went over 100%.
Yeah, and that's why he was on the autopsy table. Because looking at the kidney function on the blood test,
Right.
you didn't see that half the kidney function was gone. But when he took these two medications, it became obvious that
Right.
his body could not detoxify, his kidney could not detoxify, and kidney shut down and he was gone.
Yeah, I once heard you say your two best friends are your kidneys, and your third best friend is your liver.
Well, I've always said there are only two organs that count, the liver and the kidney.
Right.
One liver, two, yeah, okay, you could argue it's three, but liver, I mean, what do you need a heart for if you don't have clean blood?
Right.
Yeah.
Many patients have come to my office, and when they find out that it's going to necessitate having some teeth removed, they're pretty shocked. And they immediately want to know, well, how are you going to replace the missing teeth?
Yes.
Or as they put it, how are you going to fill the holes,
How do you
Doc?
fill the hole?
That's what they want to know.
Yeah, and I always counter that with, hey, dentists specialize in filling up holes.
That's right.
But it's funny you should bring that up, because I remember back 50 years ago, 40 years ago, nobody ever asked that question. And today, almost everybody asks,
Right.
what's happened in here?
Right.
Implants.
Right.
Because the dentist will say, well, if we have to take that tooth out, we can put an implant in.
Right.
So then the patient says, well, if I don't want an implant and I have the tooth taken out, I don't want to go on without a tooth. You know,
Right.
Well, you fill up the hole. You got two ways to do it. It's called a fixed bridge, which is cemented to the tooth on either side, and it functions
Right.
the same, and so on. Or a removable bridge, which pops out. You have to pop it out and scrub it every
Okay.
time you eat, because it does get goobers underneath it. And then pop it back in. There are advantages both ways. The fixed bridge doesn't come out. It's easier.
Right.
It's more like your own teeth.
Right.
But you're cutting down the tooth on either side,
Right.
which, yeah, I mean, I
Not
used to
only that-
specialize in crown and bridge, so it's kind of tough
You
for
have
me.
to have the New Jersey side and the New York side to have a bridge.
Yeah.
Now, coming from New York, that's the example I like to use.
Yeah, well,
Sometimes
we
you
have
don't
this
have
big
the
canyon in
you
Colorado.
have a big canyon.
Same idea, but
Same idea.
with the removable, it's a little more fuss and bother, but you're not cutting down the teeth on either
Right.
side. Personally, I prefer a removable, but
Right.
at least you've got a choice here. And
Right.
a lot of times, one thing I really don't care for is, will you still do root canals? Well, I give the patient the choice. Huh. In one of the books that I wrote, I started out that I'm sitting in the airplane reading a book.
Right.
And then the pilot comes back to me and says, we're about to land in New York, and the runway lights just went out, and it's midnight. We got a 45-mile-an-hour crosswind, and we're about out of gas. We don't have time to circle a whole lot. What should I do? He's asking me.
Oh.
And so I say, look, you're the pilot.
You're-
You know about these
Right.
things. You make the decision and leave me alone, because I'm reading a good John Grisham novel.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the way a dentist should be. The dentist spent 8 years in college learning the vocabulary
Right.
and the names of all the instruments, and then maybe
Right.
he spent another 10, 20, 30 years learning how to put all that together.
Right.
The dentist is the one who should make that decision. Now, the patient has input into
Right.
that, but you should not put the decision on the patient to say,
Right.
well, we can go either way, whatever you want.
That's right.
No, the patient should be told there are a lot of bacteria here which can give you heart attack. Well, my father died of a heart attack, my mother, my brother did, my sister did. Then maybe you don't need something in your mouth that potentially could give you a heart attack.
Right.
But the dentist is the one, he is a doctor of the oral cavity. She is, especially in your case. You're given all that education and experience to guide the patient into the decision.
That's correct. That
Yeah.
is correct. The American Dental Association spends a lot of time discussing ethics with dentists, and they do have a list of things that they consider unethical for a dentist to perform. For instance, in some states it's unethical for a dentist to advertise themselves as being the best. So that would be a problem for them. They would consider that unethical.
Yeah.
And I think for a dentist to know all of the harm that a root canal can potentially do, and then still offer it as an option to their patients, I think that needs to go under the list of unethical also.
Yes, and I was witness at a congressional hearing a few years ago, and at that time, the man who was the head of pediatric dentistry, dentistry for children, said he would consider it unethical to tell a parent that there was anything besides mercury that could be put in the filling.
He thought that was unethical.
He thought it was unethical to recommend composites. The only thing ethical is to say put in the poison that's the strongest poison in the planet that's not radioactive. What's the definition of ethics? Is it the same thing as the definition of successful?
No, I thought ethics had a lot more to do with what is the truth than what's successful.
And what's the truth based on?
In our world, the truth is based on science.
There is a quotation that is used by the Dental Association, and I remember the reaction of my professors when this came out. I was taking my postdoc master's in immunology, and they said, well, yes, mercury is the most poisonous metal on the planet. However, in the mouth, its toxic properties are rendered harmless. I remember the professors looking at each other, and one of them said they must have discovered alchemy.
Alchemy, correct.
Yeah. But no, in the mouth, some of the highest absorptive areas in the body are in the mouth.
Right.
And so you've got mercury coming out of the fillings 24/7.
Correct. That's right.
And its toxic properties are rendered harmless. Explain the science behind that, how that happens.
Right. It doesn't. Right.
It doesn't.
It does not happen.
Yeah.
Good point. Have you ever given any thought to the new implants that are made out of zirconia crystal?
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
Oh. It goes back to Dr. Schwarzenegger. Anything implanted in bone will create an autoimmune disease. The only difference is the length of time.
Right.
So it doesn't make any difference what you're implanting in there. In fact, they do say the only thing that would be safe would be an autogenous bone graft, which means auto, it's me, you take bone out of my arm and stick it in my mouth. But we've tested some of those.
Huh? Not good?
Lots of bacteria.
It's interesting.
And the bone, cadaver bone that they put in.
Right. Which is supposed to be sterile, cadaver bone.
It's not always.
So even bone...
I know of one case where there's a certain disease, and I don't know the name of it, that only Asians catch. Caucasians never catch this disease. Okay? This gal has a bone graft put in from cadaver bone.
Right. And
She's Caucasian, and she ends up with an Asian disease and dies of it. Because they take
that is incredible.
The cadaver of the dead Asian and stuck it in her mouth. The disease came along with it. Sterilized.
Right.
Kind of hard to sterilize DNA.
Right. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. There are some dental offices that say that you can do muscle testing, or you can do something called electroacupuncture bivole or transdermal testing. And you can, through those two systems, you can choose what kind of dental material will be best for the patient. Now, in our office, we use the blood test, but biocompatibility testing from Biocomp. And my husband happens to be a master at muscle testing, so I do have some respect for muscle testing, but I don't think it's exactly the same thing. I think you're comparing apples to oranges.
Yeah, you really are. Which one's the apple?
Yeah, I'm not sure. But one's an apple, the other's an orange.
They each find what they're looking for.
Right.
Because with electroacupuncture, you're looking for the electrical circuitry in the body.
Correct.
And our bodies are electrical mechanisms.
Beings.
The minerals bring in electrons. You have electron donors, electron receptors. Right. Yes, so it will show you, and I think muscle testing is probably in the same category here, it will show you the electrical compatibility. And it's right.
Right.
Now, what we are looking for is autoimmune diseases, which is diseases of the immune system.
Right.
So if we do a blood test that shows immune reactivity in the blood, meaning antibodies in the blood,
right,
then we are closer to determining the potential of an autoimmune disease. Right. So this is what I've always based my work on. That was done at the University of Colorado when I was there. But if it happens that both are compatible, hey, you've got a really good material there.
Very good. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Huggins. Certainly appreciate this time with you. I know your schedule is packed tight and you're very busy, and I just want to thank you again for coming.
Well, I appreciate your helping us generate awareness.
Great. Thank you.